three different versions of how he got to be known as Slick, one of which was in the training squadron. Andy blew both tires on landing. Andy didn't particularly like that version. There was another version that Andy liked particularly, and that was as a new lieutenant, he went out on an air-to-air engagement mission with a recent Top Gun grad and did really well. And in the debrief, the Top Gun grad said, that was really a slick move. So Andy says, actually that's what he told Bob Cabana recently, that's how he got the call sign Slick. The version that I know as his squadron commander is no matter how hot it was outside, when Andy got back to the ready room, there was not one hair on his head displaced. And most guys looked like typical Marine dirtbags when they came back from flying in Beaufort, South Carolina, in the summer in particular, where it was 90 degrees and 90% humidity. Not Andy, not Slick. Andy prescribed that to be a good fighter pilot, most importantly, you got to look good in the ready room and you got to look good at the bar. And Andy seldom deviated from that, with one exception. One summer afternoon, Andy went out on a bombing mission in a low level, and on his way back, Andy and his F-4 encountered a very large turkey buzzard at about 500 knots. Andy did really well with that, even though the turkey buzzard penetrated the canopy on the left side and impacted his ejection seat just by his left shoulder. Andy demonstrated his aeronautical expertise by successfully landing the airplane and convincing his backseater not to eject with all of the blood and gore that surrounded the front cockpit. That was a highlight of that experience, because after that, Andy had also, not from the direct impact of the buzzard, but the carcass of the buzzard spread shrapnel, i.e. bones, throughout Andy's shoulder. So for the next 2 weeks, Andy would have to go to the dispensary and have the doctor remove turkey bones from his shoulder. Those turkey bones and his shoulder stunk so bad that all of the lieutenants and captains wanted to have his call sign changed from Slick to Stink. Andy, with his hair in perfect comb, would walk in the ready room. Everybody else would walk out the other door. But Andy overcame and eventually got over his BO, went on to be selected as one of the first Marine pilots into the F-18 program, then went on to test pilot school, and then went into NASA as an astronaut. And he clearly is a gifted aviator. But he's also a very, very talented engineer. As a first lieutenant, he had a division, avionics division in the squadron. And as a young captain, he was the maintenance officer of the squadron. He went on to NASA. His first ground job at NASA was in charge of the new design of the drag chute for the shuttle. And then after that, he was the Cape Crusader. And then after that in USA, he spent more his time and with the shuttle program. So Andy is an exceptional engineer as well as a truly gifted aviator. But there's another quality that separates Andy from his prestigious contemporaries in the astronaut corps, and that's his leadership ability. Andy cares about people. He's always cared about people. He's always treated his troops like he wanted to be treated himself. He's always cared about people, and he's always looked after them. That was true in the Marine Corps. It was true in NASA in the 10 years that I spent in NASA at Houston with Andy. And it's true in his experience in industry. He's a great leader. But I don't want to give Andy all of the credit, because Andy had a great mentor, a great role model, and that was his dad. His dad worked with me on the space station, and for the time that he was with us on space station, truly provided adult supervision to us. Andy's dad is here with us tonight in spirit. And I'll take the liberty of passing on a few comments to Andy from your dad. You've done good, son. I'm proud of you, and I love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. That was a great tribute and good insight to Andy's life as a Marine aviator. Before I call Marcia Ivins up, Marcia is a veteran of 5 space shuttle flights, including 2 with Andy, so it was nice to get an astronaut to come that actually flew on STS-46 and 62 with Andy. When I found out she was going to be a speaker, once again, I did a little research, visited the video archives at the NASA press site, and looked for some video footage of Andy and Marcia flying. But what I did find was something that I think was a little bit more intriguing. In the early 80s, when the space shuttle was at its peak flying rate, there was a period when NASA was searching for prospective astronaut candidates. As always, competition was fierce, and for every winner, someone finishes second. Andy affectionately refers to them as losers. What I wanted to do was take a look at this interview, and this was someone that was barely edged out by Andy, and Andy's call sign was Slick. This individual's call sign was Zippy, who at the time was not pleased and denied his chance to enter the astronaut corps and fly. So you can see in the interview, there's an obvious language barrier. I wasn't sure I could show this, but through NASA technology and Ryan Smith, our videographer, we were able to put this into closed caption. So if you would, just roll the tape. So you can see he wasn't happy, but as always, time heals all wounds. While Zippy also realizes wearing a helmet that says astronaut before the selection, probably bad form. But he wanted to be here tonight, but he's with the Ringling Brothers. They're doing their final world tour, and he had a gig tonight in St. Louis. But he said, look, I want to send my friend Andy something to remember our friendship. And he sent a plaque. I think this Andy can go right next to the Debus. Pretty much shows the sentiment of your friend that did not make the selection. So before Marcia comes to the podium, she says she's cleaned it up. Andy's talked to her. I mean, normally we have a thing called astronaut immunity. We don't know what these folks are going to say when they get to the podium, but Marcia's assured me that it's going to be okay. The infamous Marcia Ivins.
I'm not sure if I should be flattered or nervous that you're worried about what I'm going to say. Okay, my work here is done. When you're an astronaut and you're assigned to a crew, your experience with the other crew members can fall into one of three categories. You either make a friend for life, you check the box on spending time all through 9 levels of hell and everything in the middle. And most astronauts will say that they've had at least one of those experiences. And if you're really lucky, on one flight, you get the trifecta of all of that. I don't actually remember when I met Andy. I'm sure he was traumatized. But we were assigned together on his first flight, STS-46. And poor Andy, the Marine pilot, was assigned with an Air Force commander, 4 scientists, and me. This was a flight of a tether, the first tether flight, a conducting tether, and for those of you that don't know what that was, the plan was to push 20 miles of string out into space and watch it generate electricity. And nobody thought that would work. In fact, the flight almost got canceled right after TCDT. But there we were on orbit, and we had trained for all of the bad things that could happen to the tether, which, as you can imagine, with 20 miles of string, involved that 20 miles of string wrapping itself around the shuttle. We got the tether out to about 800 feet, and it came to a rapid stop and proceeded to try to dump 800 feet of string around the shuttle. And I was recording audio for an IMAX movie at the time, and so the recording was really great. What you hear is the 4 scientists pretty much screaming various things to each other. You hear click, 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 which was me with the camera. You hear the commander saying, "I don't want slack in the tether." And you hear Andy, man of few words, saying, "Holy shit stains, Batman." After that flight, it was an ESA experiment. Oh, before the flight was over, after the tether business, we had a satellite to deploy, and Andy was driving the shuttle. While that satellite was deployed, everybody else was on the middeck, and he noticed that the satellite appeared to be coming back at us. And again, man of few words, I think what he said was, "Guys?" And then you fixed it, right? You do remember that part. All right. You know, and when Andy would wake up in the morning for breakfast, everybody would be rooting around getting their breakfast. Andy would have a handful of M&Ms. So see, she tells the truth. After that flight, it was an ESA experiment, and so we went through all the European Space Agency cities. And it was a whirlwind trip where the number of forks per meal exceeded the number of hours per night we spent in any one hotel. And each of these meals was massive. And Andy learned that if he sat next to me, all the meat disappeared and nobody fussed at him for not eating the vegetables. So we had a good deal going till we got to Italy. There in Italy, we were at one dinner that was, I don't know, a 92-course meal, and each course was introduced with great hoopla and fanfare, and each course was fish. And you know, Andy and fish, it's not a thing. And when we got to about course 32, Andy was looking sort of pale and peaked and very unhappy, and the commander stood up and whispered something, and the next thing we know, out comes, with great hoopla and fanfare, a half a cow, wheeled on a giant table and placed in front of Andy. And then the Earth was back in its normal spin and life was good. The second flight that Andy had was STS-62, and I won't say a lot about that flight other than it was good to have a good friend down there in hell's basement. And then you must ask him one day about the landing of that flight, which could have gone down in history as the most not good landing in the shuttle program, except that Andy, as a pilot, sort of saved the day by yelling louder than the rest of us. Andy's third flight, STS-75, was the next tether flight, and they put the band all back together again, except for me, but I got to strap Andy in. And strapping your friends in is a really unique experience. I had stopped over at the LCC first, and I'd picked up little notes written by Jessica and Meredith so that I could stick them in Andy's leg, that he could read them on orbit, and then he handed me notes to give them back to them. So I strap him in, I do the flight deck, I go down to the mid-deck, check everybody, I come back to the flight deck, and Andy is sitting there, he has read the notes, there are tears running down his face. So of course there are now tears running down my face, and if you've noticed on shuttle flights, the camera's looking right in at the commander, and the two of us are sitting there weeping together. I know of no finer human being on or off the planet. I know of no better friend and no braver heart. Congratulations.
So now we've heard from Andy's family, his life as a Marine and astronaut. So now we will segue into a chapter of Andy's life that after the flying days were complete, he morphed into a new phase of program management and really showed off his business acumen. Before we call Lee up, who is the COO of Aerodyne, to the podium to talk about Andy's life as a leader, as a program manager, like everything else, Andy pours 110% into what he does. So as a leader, just like every other aspect of his life, he was all in. Wasn't long as a leader that Simon & Schuster had approached Andy and asked him if he would write some books on leadership. So Andy's first book, which is The Death of Masculinity, went straight to the top of the New York Times bestseller. I don't think anybody in here would be surprised at that. Again, it's a career of being all in. His second book, which was Where Have All the Men Gone, made it to Oprah's Book of the Month Club. And what Oprah said was interesting, the demographics, that most of the readers were female. Because after all, where have all the men gone? But I'll tell you what, my favorite book is a self-help book that Andy put together in, I think it was 2012. It's called Man Skills. And it tells you everything in there from how to tie a slip knot, how to change a tire on a moving car, or how to run a meeting. Andy likes a lot of meetings, and he runs good ones. And I've used this book. I have one at home. I have one in my desk drawer. And I see a lot of guys out there saying, I can change a tire. I can unclog a drain. Where would I use something like this? Well, not a week goes by I don't find a use for this book. About an hour and a half ago, I was outside having a drink, drinking a Jack and Coke, talking to Joe Smitelli, drinking a Bud. Up comes Carl McManus from Aerodyne. Bartender said, "What'll it be, partner?" He said, "I'll take a Chardonnay." But bartender cocked his head, looked at him. Carl realized maybe he screwed up. He said, "Make it a double." Bartender said, "Double Chardonnay coming up." And then Carl yells out, "Shaken, not stirred." I look in chapter 7. I tab this book because I use it all the time, and it tells you, Andy will tell you, if you're getting a drink in a social environment with the guys, drink something with a J in it. Jack, Johnny, Jim. Stay away from the C drinks. No Chablis, no champagne, no Chardonnay. So I talked to Brenda. She said, "I'm a little shocked because he's Aerodyne. Jacobs, this is on our short list of must-read." And she said, "I'll tell you what, Andy has a group of those books or a box in the trunk, and we'll get an autographed copy out to Carl." So Jim Hall, I don't know what you're laughing about. I don't know how many times Jennifer's mumbled under her breath, "I wish Jim could do that." You know, why can't Jim do that? So good news is you're getting a book. Bad news is yours will not be autographed because after the Debus Award, it will exceed the $50 limit that you NASA guys are allowed to accept. So Andy, thank you for this. Without further ado, I'd like to call Lee Williams up.
Well, Bill told me, he said, I don't care what you say, but make sure you're done by 9 o'clock. So I'm gonna keep it quick. But several years ago, Andy worked for one of the best bosses in the world. Then the roles got reversed, and I got to work for him, maybe the best boss in the world. When I became familiar with the Debus Award, I thought Andy would be a perfect candidate. Yeah, as we all know, Andy has contributed to the space and aviation industry as a fighter pilot, astronaut, major contractor, and entrepreneur. I've watched Andy grow several space-related businesses through his technical and personal relationship skills. I've also watched him and his beautiful wife, Brenda, raise an extraordinary and successful family. Andy's most impressive business trait is his commitment to his customers and the people serving on our contracts. He is always upbeat, encouraging, and sensitive to the well-being of his customers, teammates, and employees. That's what Randy made a comment about. He's still the same guy. Andy's second most impressive trait is his ability to stay calm in the face of chaos and adversity, even turkey buzzards. I've always thought that the sign of a man's character is how well he deals with both adversity and success. And I can tell you that Andy is one extraordinary character. If the Debus Award is used to exemplify the character and traits of what we want our future leaders to become, Andy is the perfect pick. His work ethic, his passion, his motivation, his love of people, and dedication to the space and aviation industry is unsurpassed. I'm very proud to be his employee, his partner,